Hello, and welcome back to the Arcane Forge. My name's Josh, and today we're going to be doing a Commission Corner, a video series where I draw one of your characters, one of the monsters you use in your world, and I talk about their lore and what they're like in game, what makes them special to you. In today's video, I'll be covering another Patreon raffle winner. This month, it was Matthew Anderson who won my prize draw, which means I get to draw one of his characters, and he came up with Cha'Kak, I believe it's pronounced, the Bugbear Artificer. If you'd like the chance to have an illustration by me, then I'll leave a link down below to my Patreon, because all of my patrons at every single level get entered into the same raffle each month, where the lucky winner is the recipient of a commission, and at the maximum pledge level we have one-on-one chats, where I can draw things for you and share my screen while we have a chat. But that's enough about that. Let's get started with the video, whichever way it's going to start. Enjoy! So today's Commission Corner belongs to Matthew Anderson, one of my patrons over on Patreon, who won my monthly Patreon raffle. And Matthew was extremely excited about getting his commission because he had a character all planned out that he's not yet had a chance to use, but is planning to use in, I believe, a Tomb of Annihilation campaign. So it could be a very, very short-lived character. I don't know about you, I've played Tomb of Annihilation. I've run it as a DM, rather. I was running the first edition rules, and it was so brutal that it's the only time that my players have really said, we just need to stop this. So I'm hoping Matthew has a hardier stomach than I did for this, or that his character is incredibly overpowered and capable of surviving the Tomb of Annihilation. It might be a Tomb of Horrors, but I remember for sure it was one of the early sort of first edition, very, very famous dungeons that's been translated into 5th. So I'm hoping that he gets to play this character he's been very excited about for a decent amount of time. The character's name is Cha'Kak, I believe. C-H-A''K-A-K, maybe Cha'Kak. And they are a Bugbear Artificer, an already pretty damn good combination. There's a lot of strength, there's a lot of dexterity in there, but particularly he wanted to have Cha'Kak physically be inspired by a golden snub-nosed monkey, which I thought was a really innovative and very, very creative idea for a bugbear. Because bugbears are usually sort of depicted as sort of like feline goblinoids, I kind of went for a bit more of a Beauty and the Beast style beast creature in my Monster Monday interpretation of them. But the sort of long, gangly arms, shorter legs, large, physically imposing physique, with a lot of hair all over the body. In hindsight, they do really fit the kind of great ape, the kind of monkey or ape style frame. And, you know, having something that's large and strong as well as being incredibly agile. I don't know why it had not occurred to me sooner, but it was a really, really interesting take on the idea of bugbears and really suits them for sure. Because they're supposed to be incredibly stealthy, while still being very, very fierce in combat. And a golden snub-nosed monkey is a creature that, you know, has a very, very distinct appearance and a really wonderful colour palette. These sort of almost skull-like faces with a sort of baby blue coloured skin. And otherwise this sort of coppery, golden coloured fur, as the name suggests. Really, really distinct features, and a really interesting take. Now, Matthew had very specific ideas about what Cha'Kak would be wearing, and had a whole load of links, all sorts of images and ideas about Cha'Kak's clothing, and what his frame might look like, and so on. One of which was what he called a World War I style tank visor featuring chainmail underlinks, which I should, I believe, have put as a reference on the left-hand side of the image while I'm sketching this out, because it's a really obscure piece of kit that I'd never seen before, but it's a really interesting mask and visor. The only downside in this illustration is that this completely obscures, obviously, all of the really distinctive facial features of the golden snub-nosed monkey. So Cha'Kak ends up, because of the armor sort of covering his face, ends up looking like, you know, a long-limbed furry, you know, kind of your was about to say your average sort of monkey-inspired bugbear, but that's not really super common. But you know what I mean? Like the distinctive facial features of the golden snub-nosed monkey were obscured. I'm imagining that that's probably the intention of this, that either it's a very interesting sort of retro way of having kind of goggles or a visor for an artificer, because obviously this character is going to be creating a lot of stuff. There's going to be a lot of explosions. There's going to be a lot of, electricity or magical sparking, sort of haphazard inventions and so on. You need something to protect your eyes. So imagining this is either something that, a goblinoid would come up with in the place of glass goggles, or maybe it's a sort of time period appropriate thing for an artificer in whatever setting this Tomb of Annihilation campaign is going to take place in. But it could also be to intentionally obscure Cha'Kak's face, because despite the rest of his frame being quite apparent what it is, goblins often receive a lot of stigma in our campaign worlds because, usually they are enemies, usually they are troublemakers and problems. So perhaps obscuring the face, obscuring these facial features, is designed just to help Cha'Kak get by in a sort of social environment with humans and other more conventional player species. I wasn't sure, but either way, I like the way it came out in the end, even though it did obscure these really interesting facial features. But it's such a distinctive mask. I think that's one of the things with masks and helmets. As long as they're very distinctive, I think they still say a lot about a character. Usually I shy away from them when I'm making my own characters, even in video games and things like that, because it's I've spent all this time in character creation, molding this expressive face. But sometimes a really unique and distinctive mask can say a lot about a character and their personality as well. Definitely you get the idea, it's a tank mask, so this is going to be something that is used for protection, and all these little eye slits are very reminiscent of the sort of snow visors and things like that native people have been making in the frozen reaches of the world to stop them from going blind with the reflection of the sun off of the snow for many hundreds, if not thousands of years. So it definitely seems like a very functional piece of kit, as well as something that's very intriguing and very unique to this character. Matthew mentioned that Cha'Kak should be wearing what he called Chinese pagoda-style armor, pagoda-scale armor. And I wasn't 100% on what this meant, because, a pagoda is, a tiered tower, So I wasn't quite sure if Matthew wanted Cha'Kak to be wearing armor that looked like a pagoda, so sort of several interlinking towered-like pieces that maybe once Cha'Kak sort of kneels down would all kind of settle into place and become like a bunker, maybe. Maybe that's what he meant. But at the same time, I just Googled the phrase Chinese pagoda scale armor, those words, into Google, and what came up by and large were a lot of sort of Jin Dynasty interlinking scale sets that were somewhat reminiscent of kind of the sort of splint mail armor that samurai are often depicted as wearing. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that came up with these very, very thick and massive shoulders made of interlocking bars, all covered in these very finely woven splints of metal, all leading to a large sort of cowl that went around the face, and armor that went onto the flanks of the legs as well. There was a lot of variety in these designs, but they all had very similar sort of themes. There was always this sort of very thick armoured belt with layers of cloth and fabric over the top of them, heavy braces, usually covered in some kind of leather, these massive shoulders, as I say, and lots of these tiny little splints all interlinked together. They usually had these fantastic, grand and sort of regal helmets that, rather than having these kind of interlinked splints, were a solid piece of metal, usually with some sort of tuft of hair out of the top, usually a kind of very bright red colour. And these were probably worn by very, very wealthy people because they were usually very well decorated. There's a lot of red, there's lots of sort of strings and ropes and things like that, all tying these things together, and some used decoratively as well. And I just thought that's probably what Matthew Anderson was going for. So I thought I would draw it out and see if he liked it. In the end, he did. I really enjoyed it as well, I have to say. I wanted to show that there was maybe a little bit more freedom of movement in this carapace of armour, because as a very dexterous bugbear and someone who's going to be sort of creating things as an artificer, I wanted to make sure that perhaps it was less blocky and less bunker-like than a lot of the armour that I had seen. So I made sure to make the gloves and the bottom fingerless, which was itself really weird because I was expecting to be drawing, usually when you draw an ape or something like that, you tend to draw a fairly human-like skinned hand with perhaps a little bit of fur coming over the knuckles and so on. But I was looking at golden snub-nosed monkeys and they have these really furry, like little Muppet fingers that are completely encased in fluff, basically. I thought that may not be so great for tinkering around with. Maybe you'd end up burning a lot of that hair off or something like that. But I thought it was an interesting feature to put in. Their feet aren't always quite as hair covered as their fingers are, bizarrely. So I decided to show Cha'Kak actually tinkering with something using his feet instead, just in case, because I feel like if sparks and things are flying off there, you're less likely to have the horrendous acrid stench of burning hair on a more skin-covered hand rather than a more furry one. And I think this gave a lot of personality to Cha'Kak here and paid homage to the golden snub-nosed monkey kind of aesthetic, even though you can't really see it in the face. So I wanted to say, this was a really creative decision that Matthew made, and I wanted to highlight it in some way. So making sure that this was visible was a really important step. But anyway, he seemed pretty happy with the illustration when it came back, and I hope you enjoyed watching this as well. If you'd like to support the channel and have a chance of earning yourself a commission, then I'll make sure to leave a link down below to my Patreon page in my description box. And as well, somewhat recently, we've opened up the Discord channel. So if you're active on Discord and you want to have a chat, come say hi, chat with me, and get involved in the wonderful and very, very friendly and active community that we've got over on Discord, then I'll make sure to leave that down below, link to that down below in my description box as well. But until next time, I hope you have a fantastic week, and until I see you next time, happy monster hunting.